you see, friends, here the head of a dragon with wings going up to the Northwest Territories, to the body of the dragon in the United States, to the talons going down and gripping Colombia. Do you see in the mouth of the dragon what I see? A dove. Colombia, both Colombia as in South America and Columbia as in the District of Columbia, comes from the Irish and Italian words column, which means dove. It is the question, are we in truth, if not yet in reality, the people of the dove? So we'll come back to this. I wanted to introduce Queen Mother Bernice Atchison, who's going to give an opening prayer, but I want to say a few words about Bernice. And that is, in my understanding, friend Rudolf Steiner spoke about 2 Michael streams in the United States. One of them, I would suggest, is the Concord School of Philosophy and Literature that began in the year 1879, the Indian Summer of Transcendentalism, with those on earth as in the heavens, that brought together the Neoplatonists from Illinois and the Aristotelians, Hegelians from St. Louis, in the spirit of conversational philosophy. I used to say to Marjorie Spock, Marjorie, in this country, we don't need to talk about Goethean conversation. We can talk about Alcottian conversation. And we can also talk about Fuller conversation, as in Margaret Fuller, our Joan of Arc, who is really the mother of the women's liberation movement in Emerson's audience. They were very, very close. So the second stream, in my understanding, is represented by Bernice and the great-great-great-grandson of the founder of Tuskegee University, who will be joining us, Patrick Wallace. And this is a stream of devotion of the shepherds. Tuskegee University was conceived in the year 1879. And I consider it a great honor for those who've come to know Bernice and all that she bears and has borne. In her 88th year, she just defeated virtually single-handedly, kind of David and Goliath, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, to bring justice to 66 Black farmers of Mother Earth, 66,000 Black farmers of Mother Earth. There's so much more to the story, but let's begin with a moment of pause, and then, Queen Mother, when you're ready, an opening prayer, if you will.
Mr. Weeks, good morning to all of you gracious peoples that God have allowed to assemble with us today. And as we come forth at this time of the year to give reverence to the blessed gift that has ever been given to earth, we now will take a moment to clear our minds as we bow our heads and as we bring forth thoughts of this season. Father God, we come in the humblest way that we know how, knowing that you are God and that all things are possible through you, and that your promises is always fulfilled. Your word goes out, but it shall not come back void. And as we bow on this day of 2025, O holy night, the earth is still and await the great gift that will ever be given. The quietness The stillness is felt by every creation on earth. The seed was planted, accepted by a virgin, has lay unseen, only to contemplate and to take about until this holy night. The shepherds and the wise men has waited patiently, and the stars began to move. Someone said, "Do you see what I see?" The stillness came, and the wind whispered softly, "Come and go with me." The wise men did not answer, but began to follow. The soft breeze and the stars dropped lower to guide. There was an excitement in the hearts of men to walk, to encourage, and to follow the breeze, the light of the stars. It was a long journey. They encouraged each other, shared with each other, as they was obedient and trusting in that which was to follow. They guided them that was before them, kept them strong. And as the days drew near, the wise men continued on the journey. The earth was still, awaiting, watching, believing. The shepherds and the sheep began to stir. They felt the peace. They felt the coming of a new birth. Father, we thank you for all that is with us. And in this season, may we all share with each other with redemption, love, forgiveness, understanding, peace, and may we have tranquility as we go through these holidays. In Christ Jesus, we do pray, for it is He who was given as the most precious gift that was ever given to earth. That gift has been given, and it resurrects itself in you and I every day. Let us accept it with grace, harmony, and respect as we continue on our way. Amen.
Friends, Bernice is the co-chair of the Center for American Studies. She's of the stream, her forebear, George Washington Carver, great initiate. She's a farmer, she's a shepherd. She's of that devotional stream. So friends, I must apologize. And Bernice, we will do this again because it wasn't recorded, and I'm sorry. So I'm going to begin the recording now. Although the button seems to have disappeared in front of my eyes.
It says it's being recorded.
Is it being recorded?
It's being recorded.
Stephanie says it's being recorded. Okay, that shows. Andrew says no. Inez says no. And I have lost, and let me see where I had the button to record. I'm pause, stop recording.
Maybe it is. I do see a little blinking red light at the top now.
Okay. So
I agree. It is being recorded. The recording red light is on, so you must have got it.
Thank you.
I do see it as well, Stuart. I left and came back in, but it looks as though the recording is continuing.
Okay, so we will cut out all of this. So, but we did get Bernice's prayer. Her prayer. This is also a prayer of a woman who raised herself after her mother was taken from her, who nourished herself on grass and then on crumbs of bread, who taught herself to write with diner menus, and who was to become the mother confessor for the, quote, racist governor George Wallace. So much lives behind her words. I want to honor the medium, friends, that brings us together in the following way, and then we'll step into the conversation. And that is, if we were at a gathering and we heard someone say, people talking, saying, I use my mother, I use my father, I use my siblings, most people I know would raise their eyebrows. We don't do that when we talk about using our computer or our phone. They say teaching a child not to step on a butterfly is not only good for the butterfly, but it's good for the child. Teaching us not to use this technology may not only be good for us, but for the technology. I want to read a short passage from this book that I've rendered called Kindred Spirits, and it's taken from Ursula Burkhart's book, Karlik. And she writes about, this is a blind Swiss anthroposophist, of what she experiences behind the technology. And I've been chagrined, if I may say, that so many of my anthroposophical colleagues, they enter into these Zoom meetings without bringing this to consideration. Ursula speaks of her grief for the gnome, and Bastian Bond spoke about this at a gathering that Andrew had with great recognition. So just two short paragraphs. Ursula speaks of her grief for the gnome-like mechanical beings, noting that while they appear to belong to the elemental beings, they're cut off from everything that is living, and as a result, they are as if chained to the machine. Quote, they are an idea, a fixation that has become concrete, materialized. With their superhuman cleverness, they have been forced to work towards a manifestation of such machines, in contrast to the vital living and unfolding realm of the plants. They are thereby tragically their own prisoners, Ursula notes. As a result, they receive even less attention and devoted concern from us human beings whom they serve than do other nature spirits. I must hold the gnome-like machine beings in my consciousness and thank them for their work. Such thankfulness comes neither naturally nor readily, as is the case with other less burdened and more endearing nature spirits. Now, friends, I don't offer this as a God's truth. I offer it for your consideration. Your hearts will tell you whether this makes sense or not. This is a deeper issue that Andrew and his colleagues have worked with in an important way, and I don't mean to be dismissive at all. But if there's truth to this, I would hope that at least within our circles, before we use this technology, we can pause and consider. So this brings us, friends, to the beginning of the 2025-26 Holy Nights, All American Holy Nights Concordian Convocation. And this was inspired by a number of factors, but to go to the heart of it, including a conversation with Lila that I'll mention briefly, but to go to the heart of it, here in Concord, Massachusetts, we have the Concord Authors Festival. And being near Harvard and MIT, there are many grand celebrated souls, and they come out for the festival and they read, and there's conversations. People who otherwise are in their castles, you hardly ever see them. And one individual in particular who moved into town, who's a cousin of a friend, Willard Sunstein, Cass Sunstein, he's a professor at the Harvard School of Law, and he's received sort of the Nobel equivalent for the legal field. And as a native son of Concord, I'm always interested who arrives in town. who's brought here, because Concord is only 12,000 people. And it's a big world. So whose destiny brings them to Concord? And when I sense there's a kindred spirit, I see about ways of connecting. So I went to this talk, and uncharacteristically, I brought a question for CASC. And it was a large gathering, and it just so happened that his wife and daughter sat down right beside me. And when it came time for questions, I raised my hand, and CASC called on me. And I said, CASC, I have a question for you. Don't feel obliged to answer, but I'd be interested. I think others would be as well. And that question is at the heart of this gathering, friends. And it's as a complement to what's been happening at Harvard, or what happened at Harvard, this grand gathering at Harvard. And my question to CASC was, CASC, what would you say is the most decisive, dispassionate, and enlightened, illuminating critique of your own life and labors that you would offer as an exercise in self-knowledge and as a gift, if not an admonition for the generations to come, as an expression, as we heard with Queen Mother, of striving to become beggars in the spirit with all this grand wisdom of the human being we've been given. When I asked the question, CASC's wife, Samantha, leaned over to me and said, that was a great question. Anybody who knows people who are grand and mighty, they're waiting for this kind of question. Because we can't know our own value, perhaps even greatness, unless we keep in mind a higher standard up against which we can measure ourselves. That's the focus, friends. And a wonderful conversation with Lila, she said something of great significance. Lila, please correct me if I don't have it quite right. But we talked about David. And Lila said words to the effect, David was brilliant, a genius. But she said it was his meeting with the divine Sophia that humbled him. That humbled him. So might I ask, Lila, if you might at least pick up on that thread, and then you and Brian have the floor, and I have a passage or two to read from Robert as well.
Thank you. You know, in that conversation, I think you asked a very pointed question, Stuart, which was what was kind of at the heart of our connecting. And I can honestly say that my meeting of David was at a time I was 43, he was 48, so we were a bit more in our mature years, and both had previous marriages. I had developed, much like many women who have a strong sense of connection to the sacred feminine, had developed a certain kind of filter or a perception when I felt that a potential partner was holding the feminine in equal value as a sacred union, as opposed to so much cultural training around sort of the opposite of domination or some other lead socially that is not that. And instantly my awareness of David was that he, in his deepest heart, was a lover of Sophia. I'll just say a few things about the beginning of our relationship, and then I would like to turn it over to Brian, and then I'll come back in maybe with a few visuals and a bit more to say. But those early moments, I had two things on my list if I was going to partner. One of them was that that person would share a spiritual path. And the second was that they would be deeply involved in mythic theater. And I figured if I could find somebody involved with mythic theater, then I would have narrowed the path pretty delightfully. And David was at the time doing the 12 labors of Hercules, because his background up until that point had been with Theosophy. And the 12 Labors of Hercules through Alice Bailey's work were sort of metaphors in her interpretation of the 12 zodiacal beings. So David had been doing these community theater productions of these 12 labors for quite a few years prior to us meeting. So that kind of checked that box. And then my awareness of him as we started to meet each other was that he had a deep understanding and connection and respect. It plays out in his biography with his mother and some of the wounding with his mother, but there was a really profound respect for feminine divinity. So our whole relationship became something of, I often saw it as a lemniscate between us as embodiments of, for us, it was like a mythic map. And it was Yeshua and Magdalene's relationship that kind of felt close in, and the Christos Sophia relationship that felt like it was the cosmic holding of this sacred union. There was an early point in there where he, I remember it so clearly, you know, how memories, some are a little foggy, and, you know, you've seen pictures of them, and others really live like a living awareness. And this is one of those. We had moved up to the Starhouse land in maybe 1994. And I think it was the end of 94, early 95, when we were standing out in front of the garage, and Robert Shipakazi came up to introduce his friend Willie Bento. And that was the first time David had met Willie. And then Brian was shortly after that, along with Robert Powell and Claudia and a few other people who were part of the early Astrosopher group. But I remember that moment because Willie was just such a delightful presence and so bright. And we had had a close relationship with Robert Shipakazi through the Waldorf School, Shining Mountain Waldorf School, when that was Robert's, was the director there. So there was a sparking of all those things in the early beginning of our relationship, where anthroposophy became more the focus, and some of the work and connection with anthroposophy as Sophia and Anthropos, and it started to create a cosmology for the two of us. So that other checkbox on my very short list of a life partner became more poignant, that we were both understanding that the deep love and connection to Sophia, way beyond wisdom, but inclusive of divinity as wisdom and in sacred partnership with Christos Sophia, became really the heartbeat of our unfolding work together, and deeply of our love and devotion to each other. So can I pass it over to you, dear Brian?
Lovely, Lila, thank you. And Brian, yes, thank you. And before we conclude, you'll both be asked, what would David want to communicate to us in terms of his own self-knowledge, in terms of what he's learned on his path with Sophia? What would he want to communicate to us to be particularly aware of? Sorry to interrupt, Brian. You have the floor.
Fine. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Lila, for your beautiful testimony as well. David, I would like to read a very short statement from Wendell Berry that just came out in November of 2025. It's called The Loved Ones, and it's a very brief poem. The loved ones we call the dead depart from us, and for a while are absent. And then, as if Called back by our love, they come near us again. They enter our dreams. We feel they have been near us when we have not thought of them. They are simply here, simply waiting, while we are distracted among our obligations. At last it comes to us. They live now in the permanent world.
Hmm.
We are the absent ones. So David is an eternal spirit. He's living in the realm of the eternal. We're living in the world of the temporal. But David joined us for a while during his life, and we're very grateful for everything that he brought to us. David and Robert Shipacossi and William Bento and I had a very particular relationship as well because we were all interested in star work. We had many other interests as well. But the work with the stars was something that we shared. And quite early on, we started giving workshops. We started giving talks together, and we started doing weekend workshops. And we traveled a great distance because we lived in different parts of the world, different parts of the country. We traveled great distances several times a year to meet and to have convocations. And of course, then when Zoom came into being, we started meeting by Zoom as well. But I always really honored David's presence. David had a tremendous intellect. He had a tremendous intelligence, a tremendous ability to organize his thoughts, to express them with great clarity. But more than that, I mean, you could say he was a king, but you could say in his heart he was a shepherd, because he had this incredible warmth of love and generosity toward other people that I've rarely witnessed in other people, particularly people in positions of responsibility or power. In many cases, we will meet people who are authorities, and they act like authorities. They don't act like human beings. They don't act like your brother or their sister, but rather they act as though they're in power and you are their devotee or you are their pawn, if you will. I never got that feeling with David at all. David was always working from the heart. He saw the talents that lived in other people and cultivated them and encouraged those human beings to share their gifts with the world. On numerous occasions when I was working with David and Robert Shipacossi, who also sends his greetings. Robert Shipacossi was also a deep colleague of David, as was William Bento. And actually, the four of us formed a group called Starfire group was the Astro group. The Astro Fire was the group, but we had a wonderful way of working together. But David, who was really had this incredible intelligence and this incredible ability to organize things, but David inevitably would turn over the presentation to one who was probably much less prepared than he was, because he was always well prepared, always in advance of things. And when we had meetings scheduled, David would inevitably show up on time or a little bit early, and the rest of us would come in, 5, 10, 15 minutes late. But David was punctual. He was conscious. He was cognizant. He was very considerate of other people and very generous with his praise. He saw the talents of others and encouraged them. And I can't tell you how many times David would, one of us would have an idea, and David would say something like, "Say more about that." And he would encourage us, and he kind of cultivated this warmth and this drawing forth from other people their very best. And it was an incredible gift that he gave to other people. And he was a big-hearted human being, with the intelligence of a king and the warmth of a shepherd and the heart of Christ, if you could say that. He just was a tremendously loving, kind human being. And there were many times in our meetings when he would step in and he would bring something. And sometimes they would go on for a while, but it was never, it was always to the point. I mean, you would say, where is he going with the story? But all of a sudden he'd bring it back in, and you could see perfectly he was a storyteller. David was a beautiful storyteller, and he had a way of weaving his thoughts together with the thoughts of other people and drawing forth from other people the very best. So there are many things I could share with you about David, but I would like Lila also to speak. I just would like to say one thing. We after William Bento crossed the threshold, I think it was in 2017 or 2018, we would still appear and meet regularly, the three of us. And sometimes when we would be together, we would be giving a workshop or a talk, and I would introduce us as the three wise guys. And that often got a laugh, but it really was. I mean, because we were contemplating these great mysteries of star wisdom, but we were doing it in a very human way and a very loving way. One could really feel that in a certain sense that the shepherds and the kings kind of came together in that circle, and I felt deeply, deeply grateful to be a part of that for many years, and I know that David is with us. One thing that I have meant to read from Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry is 91 years old. He's a living legend, a wonderful writer. But he wrote something that was published in the New Yorker in November of this year, just a month ago. It was published in the New Yorker, the print edition of November 24th, 2025. And this is what Wendell Berry wrote about the loved ones. The loved ones we call the dead depart from us, and for a while are absent. And then, as if called back by our love, they come near us again. They enter our dreams. We feel they have been near us when we have not thought of them. They are simply here, simply waiting, while we are distracted among our obligations. At last, it comes to us. They now live in the permanent world. We are the absent ones. So that was Wendell Berry's tribute to the loved ones. Lila, would you like to take it from here? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Oh, a lot there. So I will also keep in heart your request, Stuart, of what would David want to be saying or sharing about Sophia. And I think it's a combination of everything in a way that can be braided together here, that I feel David's connection to Sophia is connected to dreams. I think it's connected to much of what Brian shared, his love of humanity and the capacity to really kind of see into the heart of another, and weaving that with this extraordinary intelligence. One little storytelling about how that unusual intelligence showed up was one of the moments hearing this story that I think my heart opened even more deeply to him. So he was a graduate of Harvard with a PhD in psychology around 75 that he graduated. And he was expected or envisioned even by himself as entering into academia. He loved teaching and he loved psychology, but he went to some of his professors and he said, I would like you to help me understand psyche and logos, psychology. Who was Psyche? What is logos? And penetrating as a young man, like the meaning of soul, the meaning of logos, wanting someone who he respected as a mentor in this great academic world to be able to help him build a bridge to mythology, to deeper archetypal understanding. And no one was able to really respond to that question. And it was part of the reason that he left Harvard, left Boston, ended up buying a farm in Vermont and becoming an organic farmer. And he pursued that world and that life with his wife and two very little daughters at the time, and became quite involved with the organic movement in the United States in the mid-70s. So that also responds to his connection to Sophia, because he really understood the forces of nature and of farming and of working with animals. And, you know, in a fairly remote part of Vermont, being surrounded by two little daughters and a wife and large trees and a farming world, which he was not raised in that way. This was a whole new exploration for him. But I think that he would be the first to say that he really found the mother, the sacred feminine, in the earth and in growing things and in raising a family. So I will share a couple of photos because I very rapidly put some together. Let's see here. Are those visible? Is this visible?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So this is one of my most favorite images of David Ward Tresemer. I think you can look into that face and into those eyes, and we captured a moment here after 2018. It was our last trip to Tasmania, Australia, where we spent a good part of every year for 18 years on a little island called Flinders Island between Tasmania and Melbourne. And we were on a bushwalk for about 10 days into the big forest in the Huon Valley in the southern part of the state. And we were both just in this immersion and in this deep, deep love of the rainforest and of just walking and of being surrounded by moisture and trees. And so we sat down in this place, and I just asked him to really capture everything he was feeling in that moment and like let me gather it into an image. And it's become my favorite photograph of him. It just says everything to me about, well, the connection he has to spirit through his eyes, that little impish smile, and his hands. He had the most beautiful hands, and they were a combination of a philosopher hands and a farmer's hands and a intellectual's hands. And it just, so this captures for me the essence of David Tresemer. This is also in our biodynamic farm, surrounded by some of the native flora on Flinders Island. It was a place that we got to explore, like having, you know, some people you find out at the end of their lives, they had two families and two lives and, you know, whole thing going on. We sort of had that, except it was with each other. And we became very different people, whether we were in Boulder or whether we were on this remote island in Tasmania. And we did a lot of, we introduced biodynamics and permaculture to this island, and a lot of the farmers actually started to transition to organic, mostly through the influence of Bill Mollison and permaculture. Bill is a Tasmanian, and he would come over and we would host him. Quite a rascal he was, and also a very devoted man to creating systems that really worked. So we had a whole different life in Tasmania, drove different vehicles, had different kinds of friends. We were Scottish country dancers. We sang a lot in the a cappella group, a very different identity than when we came back to Boulder. And kind of ran the Star House and created community and ceremony and seasonal celebrations and astrology. None of those things would the people on Flinders Island have had much interest in, but Scottish dancing and singing, they were all about that, and farming. We traveled a great deal. I also love this image. This is on one of our trips to England, and I'm forgetting exactly where this place was. It wasn't far from one of the epicenters of anthroposophy there, but it captured something also. David had a deep, deep love and a remembrance of a life in England, and he loved being surrounded by green. He loved nature. He loved being, anywhere that we could be outside by running water. This is not too far from where we live in Boulder. And this captures an early image of David as a farmer who, to this day, this is him with St. John's wort right around St. John's Day, when it flowers in all of our meadows here. And we provide a lot of this herb of St. John's wort to one of our apothecaries in town, and they use it in their, it's called Rebecca's, and we have 2 different apothecaries that we sell to. So it's one of our products on this beautiful 200-acre area that surrounds the Star House. And this also, I feel, captures, again, that essence of Sophia, his delight in, he would have been scything right before this, because he imported high quality tools from Europe for farming and used to do classes in scything. So this captures also an essence of the love of Sophia through the plants that surround us, through being in stewardship and right relationship with the places around us. Many of you know the Star House. This is a view of it and him standing by it, and again captures his love of this land. Our life in Boulder, very different than our life in Tasmania. Dedicated to sacred geometry, to right relationship and stewardship of the land that surrounds the Star House, of building an active ceremonial community that is not specifically anthroposophic, certainly has that woven into it, but is primarily dedicated to being a community that's what we've come to call trans-denominational. Boulder has a very strong Buddhist community, a strong yoga community, the Jewish renewal, dances of universal peace, which are rooted in Sufism, pagan, Native American, and we really wanted to build a temple space that could honor the seasons. One of his favorite quotes to people was Steiner saying, "If you want to become closer to the Christ, follow the seasons." So we do seasonal celebrations here, full moons, new moons, solstices, equinoxes, stargazing, harvesting St. John's wort and we have a lot of herbs growing in our garden that are also grown for medicinal purposes. And we're surrounded by, I love this image too. I mean, you can get the drama. He had quite a theatrical side. So this is me sitting in a double tetrahedron swing. And it's been on the land as one of our, we call them sort of the sacred sites, a dodecahedron meditation chamber. This is a double tetrahedron swing where you can sit in it and really both feel suspended, but also connected to the power of that geometry. Some of our dedication, I mentioned our love of connecting with Magdalene, started on a trip that we took early on with Robert Powell to Israel. It was 95, maybe 96. And I had this potent very unusual and incredibly lucid dream about Magdalene when we were up in the northern part of the Sea of Galilee. And I won't go into all that, but it resulted in David, who had, as I mentioned earlier, been working very closely with the Hercules myths. And I worked with him on a couple of those plays. And then at a certain point I said, okay, I mean, Hercules is interesting, and I understand your love of the 12 zodiacal beings and the labors, but it feels a little out of balance, and I would like to explore the feminine. So we went to Israel and then had this dream after that discussion, and I said, I really want to understand who Mary Magdalene was in this drama of Yeshua's life. Robert Powell touched on it, and it ended up being a deep return. We ended up, after that was our first trip to Israel, we went back to Israel at least 10 times. Had started a project there with Jewish, Christian, Arab, pagan women called Women of Vision. And on one of these more recent trips in an area up in the north of the Sea of Galilee, the Catholic Church had just unearthed, you can see it in the bottom left-hand corner, though I believe this was the replica of the original, one of the oldest altar stones of Judaism. And then they built a whole beautiful dedication to the sacred feminine with, somebody mentioned the Virgin of Guadalupe earlier before the call was being recorded. She appears kind of in abstract in this beautiful dome painting, and then there are pillars that have the names, 8 pillars in the structure of all the prominent women in the Bible, which included obviously Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, and some of the Old Testament women. And it just was like such a devotion. And for various reasons, they've connected it to Mary Magdalene because of some of the archaeology. So this particular trip, as we sat in this archaeological dig across the way from where we were staying when this dream of Magdalene happened many years earlier, it felt to us like the connection to that stream and to bringing what we could bring into the light about Magdalene and the relationship that she and Yeshua had, that at the very least was a relationship of deep and profound recognition. He saw her, she was his beloved disciple and companion and the first apostle. So this is an important part of David's acknowledgement of Sophia embodied. And Mother Mary had a whole different way of being the vessel for Sophia. And I felt strongly and passionately that Magdalene's need for being seen was part of what I had dedicated my life to. So this is a little image of some of that. I love this image. This was David's one and only grandchild, and I just love how you can see in them that they are so related. It's like, this is David Robert is the grandson's name. They call him Bobby, but his legal first name is David, after David, and that there's such a similarity in their look and in the shape of their heads and all of that. So again, this embodied energy of, what happens when we come into an incarnation. And this, you gotta love this. I mean, this is his sense of humor. Meeting Laurel and Hardy in their museum somewhere in England. Very
lovely, lovely, lovely. Lila, thank you. Thank you, because it must be touching as well to bring him to heart and mind. So thank you for all you've shared with us. May I draw this to a conclusion? This is a busy day. We're looking towards Christmas tomorrow, and we have some wonderful presentations. I'm glad Andrew's here, some wonderful offerings. But before we wrap this up, may I ask you, Brian, and then Lila, can you put in a sentence or two what David would commend to us from his life and labors, his trials and tribulations? What would he commend to us as shepherds in the sense of becoming beggars in the spirit?
I feel that one of David's gifts was that he was so present. Wherever he was, his attention was engaged with what was going on. And he honored other people to a degree that I've never seen, I think, and rarely seen in anybody else. He would take everybody into consideration and he didn't leave anybody out. It was just this sense of including from the warmth of his heart, and there was no intellectual ploy here. It was truly his interest in other people and his support for each individuality. I feel that was really one of his remarkable gifts. And his generosity toward other people, his attention, his concern for the well-being of others. He was just a tremendously generous, loving man. And I'm very, very grateful to have been associated with him for several years.
It's beautiful, Brian. Yeah, I think that it would be similar for me to really understand the capacity we all have as humans to love one another, and the dedication to building a community that supported that, regardless of one's faith or spiritual overseers, that loving each other, celebrating the seasons, and being in right relationship and in proper stewardship of the land, those were all really, really high values for him.
Thank you, Lila. I want to read just a passage from Robert Chipakazi, who's been mentioned, who is part of the three wise guys that Robert sent. And then we will draw this to its conclusion. Some comments by Stephanie and Frank Chester looking ahead to their offerings. So this is what, let's see if I can find it here. Okay. This is what Robert wrote. In 2011, David published The Venus Eclipse of the Sun. The book explores a rare celestial event of Venus crossing the face of the sun, which happens approximately every 122 years. Considering the dynamics of Sun, Earth, Venus, and the exact location in the heavens, this eclipse event, David weaves a dramatic story about the heart of technology in our time and its uses for good or for ill. He focuses his research on the significant events in the life of Christ and the lives of human beings that occur when Venus stands in front of or behind the sun in its 225-day orbit around the sun. Through a bold sweep of astronomical, historical, Christological, mythological, and cultural research, David shows how awareness of the cycle of Venus and its dance with the sun has the potential to awaken individuals to recognize and embrace their destiny, relationships, and communities. The mystery of love in human experience and the opportunity for soul development that it awakens is a heartbeat of this book. So friends, first, thank you, Lila, and thank you, Brian, and thank you, Robert, that we can be together as we have been on these holy nights. I want to turn to Stephanie and then to Frank and make mention of what Andrew will be bringing tomorrow. And then what we'll do is, for those who can linger, we'll have a time for questions. I am cognizant of the fact that we are the day before Christmas, so I don't want to drag this. I don't want this to go too long. But so Stephanie, we're in the Americas, and there was this mirror deed to the crucifixion of Christ that has the story's been told through cathedrals and the greatest of operas and chorals, art all over the world, but virtually nothing we hear of the mirror deed in the Americas. And my question to you, Stephanie, and then to Frank, is the Virgin of Guadalupe, her hands are folded over her heart. She was told to build a church to her. But you suggested that that church, and then Frank can pick up on this, was in our hearts. In fact, as Frank can elaborate more fully, in the fifth chamber of our hearts.
So just briefly, the Virgin of Guadalupe is this incredible event. She's the spiritual world essentially came through the etheric and put itself on the physical. And there's so much to say about this image, but what I am focusing on, will focus on Epiphany, is looking at this evolution of events. We tend to think of the Christ event as in Palestine and then streaming out. But what Guadalupe shows us, and also Rudolf Steiner shows us, that the Americas were participating in the Christ event from the time of Golgotha. And love that you mentioned Shipakasi mentioned the Venus transit, because there was a Venus transit before Guadalupe appeared, and has a lot to do with the outpouring of love on the planet. And so what I will be looking at is, how is it that we face our times? And we look at the statements of Guadalupe. She says 3 times, "Where are you going?" And she says 3 times to build a temple. But everything about her symbology is not building yet another church, but looking towards a new civilization, and a new civilization based on love. And that's what I'm focusing on. And we will also look towards creating this artistic event, which is very much in the seed stages of doing the a eurythmy performance of the Nican Mapahoa, and to have that take place in Mexico, working with eurythmists from hopefully all over the Americas, but definitely.
Mention what the Nippon is.
Oh, the Nican Mapahoa is the epic narrative poem that tells us about the apparitions of Guadalupe. So more to come.
Thank you, Stephanie. So Frank, the hands are folded over her heart. We must build a new church, a new chapel in our hearts. Does this have to do with the fifth chamber, if I can ask, that you have brought to civilization, to humankind? And this will be picking up too. Frank will be speaking later on this with Orland on the first.
I'm not sure I know how to answer that, but the study I have done with the heart, okay, it's definitely has an architecture to it. It's definitely could be conceived as a temple. The studies that have come out of this work is something that has never been put together in the study of the heart. The real study of the heart started about 150 years ago, and from that time on to today, the geometry or the structural archetype of the human heart has not been addressed. And so luckily, that architecture, which the cardiologists actually use that term, architecture of the heart, okay, can now be shown objectively that there are qualities that we need and can develop that we haven't yet. And the only reason that can be stated is because the heart has never been looked at in relationship to form or flow, movement. So form and movement can go back and forth between each other, and they're actually.
Frank, we've lost your voice. I don't hear you at least. I still don't hear you, Frank. I'm sorry. I don't hear you. If anybody can hear Frank, can you put
No, he got muted somehow.
Right, his mute button is pushed somehow.
There he is.
Does everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start again. Okay, the question that about the hands over the heart, okay, the inside negative space of her hands is the center of the new that's coming from this research, and the outside of her hands are the outside of the same form. So the new form that's coming has a centric and a peripheral relationship, and it's one, it's all together. So if you think of, the an etheric heart, okay, it doesn't carry liquid. And so what does it carry? It carries, from this research, it carries light. And so light also has a geometry. And light doesn't have a boundary, and yet it's bound. And so this research has shown how that could possibly be. And that would be the new that's coming, that Guadalupe's hands are showing. It's, to me, she's showing the future, because this is of the future. So even though I've been at this, and the heart and the geometry that it has allowed me to see, and allow me to make, and to visualize it, okay, is helping in a way that the heart research in the past hasn't. Because in the past it's been too physical. Although it is physical, but there's connected to that physical is flow, movement. So I hope I can, answer questions or present some of this, in the near future.
Frank, thank you. Frank will be doing this with Orland on the 1st. And on the 31st, an old friend, Jamin McMillan, will be preparing the way. And Jamin shared with me, we were together in Stuttgart many years ago, a story where he was invited to bring this movement and non-Euclidean geometry to good German solid gymnasts. And he said to them, well, when we talk about this, why don't we do this? Let's put our arms out to our side, as he was going to explain what he was doing. And he said, I'm just going to rest my arms on this plane, and you can do whatever you like with your arms. And so he talked about this non-Euclidean geometry and this movement, Boltmer gymnastics or spatial dynamics. And after about 10 minutes, the sweat was rising in these dear German gymnasts' cheeks. And finally, after about 15 minutes, their arms dropped their side. And Jamin kept on talking with his arms resting on the plane for about another half an hour. So we're talking about other realms. They'll be preparing for you in Orland, Frank. Jamin will on the 31st. But let's turn to tomorrow. And Andrew, would you say a word about what you'll be bringing? There'll be 3 offerings tomorrow on Christmas, and this is envisioned for families. I said to Andrew, if you have a great grandson, you want to put him on your lap, whatever. This is a time for us to come together. So Andrew, thank you for being here, and share with us what you'll be bringing, if you will.
Yeah, and I can see there's another Andrew Williams here. Hello, Andrew. You got my name. But I assume he's referring to me because I'm going to do this talk tomorrow. But great to share the spot with you here. As we all know, there were prophecies before Christ came, and we tend to know only a small portion of those prophecies from the Jewish faith, but there are some from Persian, and we also have found since Steiner's time Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi, and other documents that also pointed to 2 messiahs. So we're going to look at that and what was to become of 2 messiahs. And Messiah, by the way, just means anointed one. It doesn't mean the Savior. So that's a confusion people often have. But Ezekiel is one who talked about, and the 2 shall become one in thine hand. So we'll look at that as well as some of the nativity scenes of how could it be a child, in order to answer the question, how could there be a child in which his destiny could serve all of humanity? We have stories of Cain and Abel and quite differences there. So we'll try to gather all of this together in a way fitting for families. So it'll be a lot of expression of art, and a lot of what you just heard will be softened some for family gatherings. So it'll be often posed as questions, and now you kind of get where I'm going. So you'll be able to answer the questions when you see the art.
Yes, and it's a wonderful PowerPoint. There are wonderful, wonderful images. Andrew has devoted himself for years to this theme. What Andrew will offer will be preceded by Andrei Biely's heart-rending description of a lecture Rudolf Steiner gave in Christmas, I don't recall the date, where Andrei Biely describes friend Rudolf Steiner moving from a magus to a shepherd. And he's filled with humility, friend Rudolf Steiner, and modesty, and he's just overwhelmed with the reality of the Jesus children and then the Christ. So that'll begin, and then we'll end, friends, with a little known legend, a true legend by Karl Koenig, the other Christmas story that is particularly touching, because what happens in this story, very briefly, is Karl Koenig is faced with his own blind spots, his own Achilles heel. And he's very candid. And that is our theme, as kind of a complement to the high and mighty Harvard that has been described as a hedge fund with a university attached to it. I say that in goodwill, but as a Concordian, this is all about how we can end the centennial year, that a circle of friends can gather within the society and the movement that really takes seriously the expression on friend Rudolf Steiner's face that Bieli would be describing tomorrow, the depths of this reality of the Christ. So that will be begin, then Andrew's offering, and then this other Christmas legend by Kalkunik. Very touching. So I want to turn Queen Mother to you if you can hear us. And Queen Mother has been kind enough to have carved out, she's hosting many, many, many family members. So I felt guilty even asking her, but she's coordinating a household. You can imagine as a great-great-grandmother, she's had to direct people there. Another aspect of Queen Mother's life is she's buried 5 of her own children. Imagine that. And just the other day lost her sister-in-law when her house exploded and she was burned to death. This is Queen Mother's life, day in and day out, day in and day out, from having raised herself with the motto, better to be bitter, rather be better than bitter. Rather be better than bitter. So Queen Mother, if you can hear us, see if we can get her attention. Do you hear us, Queen Mother? So we'd like to invite you to give a concluding prayer to wrap this up. And I mentioned to the others that you've been coordinating a very, very full and busy household. We understand that. We're grateful that you're with us. So let's pause for a moment and then conclude this first in the Holy Nights, all American Holy Nights, Concordian Convocation. And on Epiphany, we look forward to having representatives of all the countries in the Americas talking about their guiding genius. We'll come to that later. But Queen Mother, when you're ready, if you want to give us a concluding prayer.
Here, as we come to the conclusion of this program for Concordia for this day, we want to give thanks and reverence to a God that is unseen by most eyes, but are felt within the spirit and within the soul. So therefore, we come at this time thanking each and every one of you for being with us, for sharing your thoughts, and for sharing a part of yourself. This is how we are reincarnating, because what you share doesn't only resonate to me, but hopefully I will take some part of it and give it to someone else. And at this moment, we bow our heads. Father God, we want to thank you for this time, for the presence of all that is in the surrounding. We ask you to pour out your blessings upon us. Let us find mercy and grace. Forgive us for our sins and our trespasses, for we realize none are perfect, but we realize that mercy has trumped the law. And because of that, you sent your Son that brought that grace and mercy that we may have everlasting life. And in that everlasting life, however long it is, we pray that each of you will have peace, love, and tranquility. Amen.
Amen. So Lila, are you there? If there are others, let's formally conclude so we can everybody can turn who needs to their preparations. But Lila, can you linger a little bit if people who want to stay have questions? Brian, I know you have plenty on your plate, so don't feel obliged. So let's formally conclude now. And Lila, do you have a few moments if there are any questions?
Sure.
Good, good. So those who need to depart, please do so. Wonderful to see all your faces. Glad you're with us. And those who wish to stay for a little bit of conversation, we can do so. And otherwise, no one should feel obliged. But Patricia, are you there, old friend? Can you hear us? Or are you muted?
Yes, I can hear you.
Any thoughts? I'm always asking you, because you're such a good listener, what moves in your heart? Any thoughts you wish to share from what you've heard?
Mm.
Be nice even to see you if you're visible.
There we go. And this was what a beautiful beginning, and the strength of all who are present. My goodness. And all, we're centered in our hearts and learning more. I just think I look forward to continuing, and that you brought people from all corners. That seems to be what's going on here. Our hearts mingling, and thank you all for your work. So appreciated.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. Other comments? Bill, what moves in your heart, old friend?
Oh, just the reminder of how close we are to those yonder ones. They're not so yonder. We need to incorporate the yonder ones and the whole yonder, doggone it. Yeah. And don't forget the rock being.
Good. 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 Andrew and Charlene, anything you wish to offer before we wrap up? Everybody else has spoken.
I will say thank you. So thank you.
Nice to have you with us. And Brother Andrew in LA. Don't know if you can hear us. Perhaps not. So
I would like to say something when you have a minute.
yes, Frank, please go ahead.
I also knew David Tresemer. He came to my house many times, and we went to Green's Restaurant all the time. We also would go to the Exploratorium, and we would talk about his work. Sometimes he would bring friends, and I can't agree more than what everybody said about him. He always shared his work with me, and I shared mine with him. And so I miss him a lot, and I cannot believe he's not with us. So anyway, I'm glad to hear all the responses about him. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, unless there are any final comments, a warm Christmas Eve, and those who are able to gather with family and friends, we will meet tomorrow at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Pacific Time, and in between, you all know the times. So thank you. Thank you very much. And blessings on David. Take care. Take care.